And we made it once again. It's Friday, and Friday is a specific time for something, man.
Is it that Friday? It's that Friday?
It's always that Friday, man.
It's my favorite spec analysis to do, the melees in TLF, baby. Tier List Fridays. Let's go. We're checking out melees.
You and me both, man. But yes, melee is close to our hearts, and we did take a look at the latest Nathria rankings because we are getting close to that 9.1. You might have seen the PTR being out. So we just want to see like how the specs are against each other. We didn't really look at too in-depth numbers like how much each spec does on each boss, although certain specs are good on certain bosses. This time around, we took a look at the Warcraft logs across different levels of skill for players overall, and obviously the top of the top, and also Subcreation does some statistics as well. As always, these analyses, take them with a little bit of a grain of salt because, you know, you cannot factor everything when it comes to raids. You cannot factor power infusion, you cannot factor specific pull times, bloodlust times, and all of that. So just take this with a grain of salt.
Now, with further ado, let's check out our first on the list, which is the Arms Warrior. And man, let me tell you, Arms Warrior has been in the shadow of Fury for some time now. It doesn't mean that Arms Warrior cannot do well in any raid composition. But yeah, the gap between Arms and Fury is just getting bigger and bigger. And I don't know whether it's like the smoother play style, just the raw numbers. I don't know what it is, but apparently so far Arms is a bit iffy. Now, you played Arms in the raid a couple of times. What was the feel on that?
So the thing is, Arms really hits really hard, especially on two targets. The problem is that Arms doesn't really scale as well as Fury anyway, and obviously scale is like a contentious term right now.
Very sensitive topic.
Very sensitive topic, but the problem mostly with Arms as well is that it doesn't really do well in AoE. It doesn't translate as well as Fury. Obviously both classes have their AoE capped. Arms really excels at sweeping strikes, but overall I think Fury just matches better with the Covenant, just matches better with the fights. All of the cooldowns are really short now.
I would say Fury doing super good on fights like the Nathrias and Sun King, as opposed to Arms, which you mentioned. I mean, Arms is pretty good cleave wise, but in big groups, I just feel Fury. That's
kind of the issue because Fury was always taking Arms on those fights, but now Fury's kind of taking Arms in the more single target as well. So that's just a shame. And obviously Fury's a little bit better than Arms, probably not by too much, but the fact that it's a little bit better, the top players will always play Fury over Arms. So the logs and performance will always be skewed. But right now, if you really look at how it overall matches against every other melee spec, not the raid spec, it's kind of like around C
tier for at least judging by the data from the last week's logs. But it's there. It's you know, it has to stay in the shadow of Fury, and probably there's a reasoning here that it shows so low because a lot of people switch probably from Arms to Fury, and the representation is not as
I mean, it's at least close to what we had it last time. And speaking of last time, Assassination Rogue was C tier last time. How about Assassination Rogue now, man?
Man, it's lovely. It's and I'm happy actually for Assassination. I've been hating on Assassination for a while, just from BFA, because it felt super like easy and
basic
you basically almost had the gameplay for you, at least in 8.3, right? But that all changed because dabbling more now into Assassination, I can definitely see its appeal. Although don't get it twisted, it's still one of the easiest specs to play in single target. Okay, but you can see it shine on mostly single target fights, but also in fights like the Nathrius. If you spec into like Crimson Tempest and, you know, a Subterfuge and get all of that AoE goodness going, it's pretty good too. Now, that being said, Assassination has seen a rise due to the buffs for the legendary, the Doomblade legendary, which is really good in single target. And just because, you know, you get an extra bleed over there with all of the other stuff, it's amazing. Also, you know, Outlaw was like kind of the king a while back, like from all the rogue specs, even in single target. That ain't the case anymore. Assassination has taken Outlaw, and you will see a pattern here. Most of the quote-unquote dot classes tend to outshine, you know, the pure single target bursty ones, and you'll see that throughout fight. And this is mythic. This is why generally this will happen. So Assassination is not the easy spec you would think it was anymore. I 100% would recommend trying it out. it's definitely like more easy in single target, but has its ramp up and maintenance on AoE. And in fights like the Nathrias, as I said, Sun King, even generals, you have to know what you're doing and maintain your stuff all the time. And right now, judging by all of this, I can safely say that Assassination so far is S tier.
Yes, it is.
Put it on there, baby.
And this was very, very surprising when I looked at pretty much all the data and all the analysis on Assassination. It's not surprising because you can think of Assassination as the affliction of Rogue. And Affliction has always been naturally really good at raids and single target, and that's probably why Assassination works really there as well. Now that it's maybe let's say properly balanced. On some fights, it seemed like it was doing better than Windwalker, which was so far one of the better specs that we've had in the past.
Yeah, that's the thing. As people got more and more gear, and the haste levels, especially for Assassination, got higher and higher, that made it much more smoother and have your ticks roll faster. So that is quite consistent damage, which in Mythic you always tend to value more as we progress further and further, because that damage is always there. Assassination isn't getting punished from things like mechanics, because if you know how to play it and maintain all your dots, once you have to get the fuck out, you still have your damage, your main damage rolling in.
There's some uptime there as well.
Yeah, so this is probably why a lot of these dot classes. But okay, let's move along for the next one on the list, which is Enhancement Shaman. Oh baby, remember the time when Enhancement was like A tier?
Yeah, I remember the time. The beginning of Nathria was pretty fun because I played Enhancement all the way to us getting certain Nathrias down on Heroic, because we're a Heroic raiding guild. But it did feel like the more everybody started to get geared, the more I was kind of falling behind everybody else in terms of raw output. It's not an easy spec to play. I have to stress this out. It's not an easy spec to play. It's a very busy spec. But all in all, the damage is still there. Unfortunately, when 905 changes were released, and especially with elemental buffs, elemental was always doing a little bit better than Enhancement overall, and it was sad to see that Enhancement didn't get anything. Although it's also very difficult to judge Enhancement's performance because Wind Fury is a decent increase in damage for specs like...
I love when you play
it obviously depends on the comp, but if you have like a Havoc, which is one of the better specs to have Wind Fury on, if I recall correctly, in the last testing, Wind Fury gave Havoc like a little bit like 2 to 3% extra damage. Hey, that's essentially an extra trinket most of the time. So add that to like a couple of other melees that you have in a raid, and your damage is a little bit higher than what you see on the meters. But with that out of the way, Enhancement, we last had it on A tier,
and now I think it's dropped to B
tier. Yep. Enhancement is not that much better than Arms, but there's a big difference between Enhancement and Arms, and they really cannot be on the same spot. Although I do have a strong feeling that Enhancement also dropped because a lot more people are playing Elemental.
That can be true. Again, as the same argument with Arms, a lot of people dropped Arms and picked up Fury. It's an issue of representation for sure. But B tier for now, judging by all the data. And now let's check out the Kitty Cat, one of my all-time favorites in Shadowlands at least, and it has risen. I always felt like that Feral Druid has always had a big shine on pure single target fight stink on Shriekwing, which I think is still #1 DPS on Shriekwing.
Yes, I think Feral is the best melee on Shriekwing. The best
melee on Shriekwing for sure, and it will always shine. Shriekwing is one example. You have Slush Fist as well, where it can deliver really good. What else? Super single target Artificer.
Essentially, maybe similar bosses like Assassination, like pure single target where you can just maintain everything.
I was just about to say another spec that if managed properly, the bleeds, primarily like snapshotting the bleeds in key moments where you have to get the fuck out, and that means you're not getting punished as hard as let's say a red paladin, for example. Because if you don't connect with your target, you still have your main damage dealers going through, and that maintains you up there. Now, that being said, the main problem why Feral is not on the top of the top is because in Nathria there's a lot of AoE fights, and it's really bad over there.
It's actually, I think Stone Legion Generals might be one of the worst fights for Feral, and that's a very crucial fight.
You can ask any Feral about Sun King, and they'll hate it.
I think Sun King is just an extreme, because Sun King, although it's important to have damage, is not as important as healing. Like, healing can kind of carry a lot of DPSers through Sun King. The problem is that Stone Legion General is actually a crucial point in progressing through Mythic, and it's one of the bigger walls. Sludge Fist kinda as well, but mostly Stone Legion Generals. If you want to get your cutting edge, you have to go through that, and unfortunately that's not a really good fight for Feral, although on the Nathrius, it might not show on logs, the Nathrius priority damage can be really good for Feral.
Oh yeah, it's super good. I mean, it doesn't it can shine in the phase 1 with the AoE things, but it definitely will start to shine in phase 3 for sure when there's like just the Nathrius there and you start pumping all your shit, you know, Convoke and all of that. But that being said, it has risen from the B tier to the A tier, which it's still super pumping.
It's a solid A tier spec. So Ferals, rejoice.
Oh yeah, love
Play
you kitties, love you. All right, let's check out the Frost that night. Oh shit, baby, what the fuck happened here?
All right. So it's not very clear to a lot of people like how good Frost and by extension as well Feral is, because when you look at the overall logs, and you might be able to see them on screen right now, the general analysis of everybody, like all percentiles, from like 1 percentile to 99 percentile, Feral and Frost are a little bit like B tier-ish, but obviously once you get a proper player to bomb some serious numbers, they both rise. And right now, Frost has been getting a lot more attention. In our talk with the boys in our podcast, it doesn't seem like it was just an explosive of buffs or anything. It's just people playing more Frost.
Yeah.
Frost just has a really good kit, and obviously that comes with Breath of Sindragosa, which I know not a lot of people like, although I don't really see why. It's a fun skill. But Frost is doing really well. Now that everybody knows the timings of mechanics, everybody's like super organized. You don't have to fuck up your breath, because actually Frost's performance is really tied into the Breath of Sindragosa, the uptime.
Yeah, there's actually instances in the data where some Frost DKs actually outperformed Unholy DKs even in AoE, so that's telling something. I don't know if it's just luck, procs, or whatever. But
it could be strategy comps and everything like that.
Yeah, but so far so good. Frost is basically in the S tier.
Yep.
I was about to say A tier, but it was A tier last time we did the DPS.
Yeah, it's definitely a difference. I think more people are playing Frost, and I think what I personally believe is that after so many months of Nathria, people have like the mechanics down to a T. So you know when you can keep your shit up and not. So that's when all stars are aligned, Frost is S tier.
Oh yeah, and I'm happy for the Frost boys, don't get me wrong. It's like super good to see all of this, and you'll see throughout it, there's a lot of specs that make it into S tier. But moving along, we have the Fury Warrior, and I know there's a lot of like community, love for Fury Warrior. I know there's a lot of community love for Arms as well. But man, do you remember when we started doing this tier list and we were looking at Fury?
I think the first series that we did, Fury was a little bit below Arms, and normally Fury always catches up to Arms. We say that every time, but we really thought that Fury would only start to catch up in maybe the next year, 9.1 tier, but it actually caught up pretty quick. Probably due to how the power scale is right now in Modern WoW.
And it's basically a thing. But I think you mentioned this in when we discussed in Arms. It's basically a thing now where you would normally expect Fury to really do well in the fights where there's a lot of AoE involved, but guess what? Now it does really well in single target too. And it does so good that it basically propelled Fury. It was pretty decent last time we looked at it. Like
I think it was like around closer to the bottom half of A tier.
Yeah, well in the middle pack, but now it's definitely an S tier, and it's right there with Frost. That being said, it's gonna be interesting to see how things will rattle up, like moving it, because now we have 9.1 PTR. There's a lot of changes coming.
We're getting some patch notes. Yeah,
and yeah, I'm really curious because we're gonna take a look back. Obviously, we're gonna do a lot of comparisons with these tier lists and see how things have changed for sure. But so far so good. We have two or actually three specs that have moved from A to B tiers up to S tier, which is really nice in my book. Okay, next up we have the Havoc Demon Hunter.
Let me just start by saying that I've actually missed playing Havoc, and not the BFA bullshit Havoc, but the Legion Havoc. We don't have the Legion Havoc back, guys. Don't worry, we don't have any Chaos Blades or anything like that. But after talking and after looking at some high ranked Havocs, and we talked with one of our boys, Lego, who's
our Patreons, one of our
his mythic rating with Havoc. I think he's pretty close to getting Sire if he hasn't gotten Sire yet. But Havoc has a couple of playstyles right now, and one of the best is Momentum. And if you guys have been watching our channel for any amount of time, you know I'm a big fan of Momentum because it's just a very high skill cap playstyle to pull, and it's very satisfying.
Oh yeah.
Havoc is overall in the raid, by looking at overall performance, is a little bit average in terms of overall performance. It's average. Its value obviously comes from its damage output. It mostly comes from its debuff, because although Vengeance is a very good tank, Vengeance is maybe not the best raid tank at the moment, although it's up there. It's probably still up there, but maybe people are trying different tanks and you kind of still want the brand, right? The brand.
Well,
and since you've heard of Fire Mages and Balances and Afflictions, they all love that 5%.
You're not here anymore in night 1.
So
I still love you.
Don't make people cry, man. But that's when you look at Havoc's performance, if you're the only demon hunter in the raid, your damage is 5% of the spellcaster's damage as well, so that can add
big contribution.
Up. That aside, Havoc is probably the best melee DPSer on the Nathrius, which says a lot, because obviously the Nathrius on Mythic is the one that you want to get down, right?
Of course, yeah.
So even if it's not the best for all the other fights, it's performing really well on the Nathrius, obviously because of all the movement. If your group is lacking a sufficient range DPS, you can just fly to platforms and just deal with the range adds. That's really, really, really good.
Also, I would like to add here that in the example of being punished by mechanics, because the high mobility of DH, they can really dodge mechanics super easy, not be punished for it, and continue on DPSing. We exemplified this with the dot classes like Assassination and Feral, and upcoming on Holy Decay.
Yeah.
They have to like do the mechanics in more of a slow pacey mode, but still have their damage tick. While Havoc can still have to do the mechanics, but because it's so super fast and can dodge a lot of the shit, it's not as punished.
I think Havoc is in the same boat as Windwalker, where they can just go out and get back in super quick.
Yeah, most mobile motherfuckers in the melee spectrum, so this is one other thing that can propel them. But that being said, it was A tier last time, it's still an A tier for now.
It's I think last time A tier was a little bit different. We had a lot of specs into A tier. But right now Havoc is in a really good spot. I really like seeing Havoc, and I'm actually leveling my own Demon Hunts right now, and I cannot wait to play Havoc.
Well, we'll see how that pans out, but let's move along to the more dominant spec of the rogues. Is Outlaw. I mean, dominant for a big chunk of time. Outlaw, which you would expect would only do good in like Cleave and AoE, but no. Outlaw did some pretty amazing stuff in single target. It was the king of the rogue specs, and it was
so
basic.
Far.
Yeah, it was
up until like a couple of weeks ago. Last time we had him as the best rogue spec in A tier, while all the others were like C tier.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Outlaw is no joke. Outlaw is not an easy spec to play if you want to play it at its full capacity and its full build. I tried it, and you know, there's a lot of stuff there. I honestly didn't expect that, because now getting into it, we'll get to sub in a minute, but out of all of the rogue specs right now, I would classify Subtlety the least complicated to play.
Subtlety?
Yes.
Really?
And that says a lot. But in terms of like the spectrum of Outlaw and where it's placed currently, it has been taken out by Assassination. It's more or less because of the buffs to the Doomblade, and also in AoE fights, you can see some Assassination beating Outlaw when they play the Zoldyck legendary. I told you about the legendary.
Yeah.
You know, when the mobs get to 30%, you get 30% extra damage on your dots.
That's pretty cool.
And
actually.
in the Nathrius, when you have, you know, Crimson Tempest on phase 1 and all of that, it really starts to pump out. So that being said, Outlaw have to retain its position in A tier, although if Assassination wasn't that good, probably it would have probably taken the S tier spot. But this is how it is. I'm actually pretty happy because I'm actually loving Assassination. I'm loving Outlaw too, but you know, I love just the shifts, right? Outlaw was dominant for this whole time.
I mean, it's good to have variety, and it's good to, you know, be able to do multiple things. And speaking of multiple things, somebody that cannot do really multiple things is Red Paladin.
Red Paladin, baby.
Oh my god. I mean, you've probably seen clips and highlights and how Red can just explode stuff. Baby, and if you don't know how Red can explode stuff, you can check our guide on Red Paladin, which is up. Red Paladin has one of the best damage profiles in terms of rating and pretty much all the DPS content, because you have a 1 minute damage profile.
That's
with Divine Toll, Final Reckoning, Execution Send, and Seraphim as well. They all feature into a 1 minute profile, which makes Red one of the best ones for Sludge Fist, if not the best.
Probably the best melee
DPS for Sludge Fist. It's really good. It doesn't do too bad on Stone Legion General. Last time I checked, it might not be the best for the Nathrius, which is probably what's keeping it from duking it out with the big boys at the top.
You can have like Reds change their talents and legendaries for the fight for the Nathrias, you know, to gain that phase 1 advantage. But then you kind of lack it.
That's the thing, right? Because the Nathrias really wants priority damage, right? Odds are important. There's so many specs that deal so much better AoE damage than Red. Where Red's strength is purely in the single target burst, purely in the pure. If you want one guy to go down, that guy's gonna go down, no sweat. And this is the beauty of Red. The problem is its mobility always remains an issue with Paladin.
Mechanics will punish Reds for sure. That's the thing.
It depends on what kind of classes you have. It depends if you're lucky if you get Night Hunter or not, because you don't really have the luxury of not being in melee pretty much all the time. Even with all of that, Red is still a solid A tier. Probably better than Feral and Havoc from...
It is better than Feral and Havoc for sure. And you will think that, you know, Feral is another example of a pure single target beast, but this Red damage is just so ridiculous. And talking about the mechanics, I guess you can cheese or just avoid some of them through bubble. I don't know if you want to do that, but
you want to do that. You're going to want to do that.
It can happen that, I don't know, you're fighting Artificer, right? And you get your window. You don't know you get the mechanic in, right? But you put in, you get into your Final Reckoning and Execution Sentence. And then you get to do the portal.
That can be very punishing, and that really skews the performance of Red, because if all stars are aligned, Red can really pump. And I'm actually scared of playing with a really good Red that doesn't have to do any mechanics. They're gonna pump, man.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now moving into a little bit more of the disappointing department, because this is one spec that is really close to my heart. Subtlety Rogue. I maintain my position on it. It's one of the most rewarding and engaging specs in the whole game if played right and mastered right. It just has its intricacy. The problem with
they just cannot get it right, man. They just cannot get it right.
They nerfed it so bad. So the nerfs it received at the beginning of the expansion, because you have to remember, subtlety was, I think, S tier at some point, at least at the beginning, coming close to it.
Pre-patch, beta-ish.
In beta, it was
I think it was nerfed about 2 or 3 times in beta.
Yeah. That being said, it can still do really well. One of the biggest things it has for itself is the obviously super fast access to burst. And you can see it do pretty good in you know, fights like Sluggish Fist and Shriekwing and so on. But when compared to the other rogue specs, the damage profile is just not there. It's as simple as that. There's a lot of things we can talk about when it comes to subtlety and how it can be improved. We're probably gonna have a podcast on that with, you know, with the big boys and further develop the discussion. But just in pure raw numbers, subtlety cannot deliver. And sadly, it's gonna be a D tier. It's pretty heartbroken, but
I mean, the thing is, ever since we started to really cover all the specs in BFA, sub has always been at the bottom, and it was so cool to see it actually pump. But they just cannot get the balance right with sub, and that's a big shame.
Yeah, probably they're gonna look. I'm hoping they're gonna look at it into 9.1, but it hasn't changed from. Well, the last time was C tier, I remember, if I remember correctly. No, it was D tier still.
C tier was definitely C tier.
Yeah.
The thing is, sub is just not there, and Assassination Outlaw are better than sub, but they're better by such a large margin that people are just not playing sub as much.
Big differences. Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, now let's move along to, I would say, happy news.
A surprising as a
Survival!
Actually, a surprise to anybody but the people that were playing survival, because we've dabbled into survival obviously for the guide, and as soon as I got a weapon, I mean, you've seen the changes.
Yeah,
on
man,
good weapon.
Jesus Christ.
So I haven't had that big of a boost in any classes damage as I did in survival by just getting a big weapon upgrade. So survival goes really well with gear. Survival is one of we've seen survival do really well. Maybe one of the best specs at.
I think it was Sun King.
Was it Sun King?
I think it was Sun King. Yeah.
Sun King was way up there with Windwalker.
Either Sun King or Storm Legion.
Survival is really good. Survival has probably a baseline design problem where the single target is just not there. It was really good in BFA, and not a lot of changed in Shadowlands, but survival is really good in AoE, probably covering for the weaknesses of other specs. And I mean, it's nothing else changed. We didn't get any buffs. didn't get any nerfs or anything. Survival is just the same. It's just that people are playing survival a little bit better, probably because of the fall of marksman. Maybe we have a little bit more survivals out there.
Yeah, but it's still in the shadow of marksman and probably BM.
It's
sure,
probably.
But here, listen, guys, we're not comparing any of these specs with the ranged ones, right? Yeah. This is really important because if you were to put the range boys here, there would be no S tier in melees.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate state of events. But survival is still a clear B tier. It's really good there. It's up there with enhancement. Yeah. It's almost as good as enhancement, but not really.
It used to be C tier, so
it's better than arms, though.
It's better than arms.
Surprisingly better than arms.
Good for survival. I'm happy as fuck for survival because again, it's one of those love letter specs where you get a lot of reward out of pulling it right. It's just such a cool fantasy and toolkit. Okay, now let's move along to one of the dominant kings, I would say, in all of the season, the Unholy Death Knight.
The Unholy Death Knight seems to go under the radar of a lot of people, probably because it's no Boomkin, it's no Fire Mage, and obviously it hasn't been a Windwalker, but Windwalker has been nerfed a little bit, and although we'll see if Windwalker is worse or not than Unholy, but Unholy is just very solid. It's one of the best specs for the Nathrias because of quick access to AoE.
Yeah.
The cooldowns are basically where the difficulty in playing Unholy comes by, because accepting Unholy Blight, which you may or may not run on certain fights, all the other cooldowns can be reduced by you simply playing the game. You're probably going to be running with Army of the Damned to get Army of the Dead quicker, or any other cooldown. So Unholy is just really good. It goes really well with gear. It scales really well in AoE. It's just really solid. Nothing changed in terms of its design, buffs, nerfs, or otherwise. Since the patch has been rolled out.
But it had, I mean, the numbers do indicate that from last time it has to jump a little bit, right? Because it's basically at the edge right now between A and S, but I think we can place it into an S tier.
The thing is, it's very hard to judge Frost and Unholy, because probably as the raid progressed, more Unholies cleared the Nathrias than Frost by a large margin.
Sure.
So you could say that Unholy is better than Frost, but probably right now, because maybe more people are playing Frost, because everybody's at kind of like an even playing field, Frost is seeing a little bit better performance, although on paper I would still go with Unholy if I wanted to be safe. For progression, I would probably still go with Unholy.
Well, that being said, it leaves us to one more spec, your melee favorite in Shadowlands, your coup de grace, your creme de la creme, your shining goose, gold eggs. Give me more.
Bee's knees. Let's go. Windwalker has received nerfs in the. I mean, we've heard the doom and gloom people complaining about the Windwalker nerfs, which actually we're a little bit sad to see. I mean, Windwalker has been it's been a long time since Windwalker did really good in raids, as opposed until Nathria. And even with all of the raids, if you look at the screen right now, we'll probably have a graphic of our old tier list where, judging by the performance, Windwalker was the only S tier.
In the melee
department, yes, clearly it was kind of like duking it out with the big range boys, but now it's been taken down a peg. And personally, I thought the nerfs were a little bit too much. But it doesn't seem like that. Right now, it's kind of in line with everybody. So if you really look at the performance of top Windwalkers, it has all the mobility that you want. It has all the single target. Still has decent single target.
Of course.
The AOE is still there, surprisingly, because that was where most of the nerfs hit Windwalker. I feel,
but it's still bonkers.
And right now,
it's the top melee still in the S tier for sure. We mentioned the mobility, and again, another class that cannot be as punished when mechanics come around. Just because of the pure mobility. Its damage profile, although it has been nerfed, it doesn't seem to have been affected in the overall grand scheme of things. Sure, you can see maybe some lower performances in some fights, maybe, but overall, it's still the king of the melees. And as you said, man, I think it's pretty good. I hate when they nerf specs. I think we can both say that we'd rather have them,
sometimes it's necessary, but not all the times, and definitely not as much as they're actually addressing this.
Yeah, but as a general philosophy, I believe at least that the more you look at other specs underperforming and change those rather than nerf the ones that seem to outshine others, I think that's a better game design overall. Because if you're gonna always nerf the top specs, there's always gonna be super niche metas that on specs that will always be the fan favorites, right? This is how it is. WoW has become this meta focused game, like everybody wants to play the absolute best, and it's not fair for the amount of people that want to play the specs for their fantasy, for their diversity or whatever. So I think in the grand scheme of things, the tier list right now is looking better, I would say, because there's a lot more specs into A and S tier.
A and S tier are a little bit more popular, and it's actually more in the S tier. Yeah. There is some clear differences between C and D, but that's probably mostly to do with popularity and number of people actually playing the specs.
Yeah.
You've touched a bit on the sub, and I've touched a little bit on arms. I think both can be a little bit better than what you would see, but there's a clear difference between sub and a clear difference between arms and a clear difference between these two and the rest of the tier list, which is why you see the rankings the way it is. Now, this is our opinion by looking and analyzing all of the data that we could gather, and we know you have your own opinion as to where each class can go each. And I know there's an arms warrior out there that says, man, I have DPS so many Windwalkers I cannot count it, and that's fair because this is all based on the top of the top, the players that can play this the best, and this is it. This is what you get.
Yeah, and you know what else you get? The best of the best, the top of the top, Patreons, because you know we have been on the top because of you guys. Thank you so much, Patreons. You know we love it. You're supporting all of this content, you know, the class guides, the podcast with all of the specs, the TLFs. Thank you so much. And hey, if you ever wondered how to become a Patreon, there's a link in the description.
Surprise, surprise,
Go
right?
ahead and check it out. It's all there.
All right, well, thank you everybody for watching the video. Thank you for supporting our channel. You can catch us on stream as well, where we have a big gang supporting us as well. And you can catch us playing pretty much most of, if not all of these specs.
Almost all of them. And thank you for watching up until this point. And remember, have a great weekend ahead. It's been Friday. You know where to find out what day it is.
It's Friday.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.